Where are they now? Professional athletes, basketball. The Men Who Own the Winter, written, produced, and directed by Baron Darby, narrated by Brian. There is a sound in a basketball arena that exists nowhere else in sport. It is not the roar. Football has the roar. Baseball has the long summer hum. Basketball has something closer and stranger than either, because in basketball you can hear the shoes. 10 men in a room the size of a warehouse, 20,000 people breathing on top of them, and underneath all of it, the squeak of rubber on hardwood. It is the most intimate, loud noise in American life. You are close enough to see a man's face change. That closeness is the whole reason this book exists. Football gives you a helmet. Baseball gives you 90 feet of dirt and a cap pulled low. Basketball gives you a face, uncovered for 48 minutes in a room where the front row can hear you swear. We did not just watch these men, we read them. We learned what Michael Jordan looked like when he had already decided the game was over. We learned what Charles Barkley looked like when he thought something was funny and was about to say it anyway. We knew their faces the way you know the faces of people who lived in your house. And then the season ends, and the next one ends, and 1 year a man walks off a floor for the last time, and nobody in the building knows it was the last time, including him. The average career in the National Basketball Association is a little under 5 years. The average life afterward runs closer to 50. This book is about the 50, 60 men, every word of it from the public record. Some of them became richer than the franchises that employed them. Some of them went back to a high school gym because the high school gym was the only place the sound was still right. Some of them got sick and told us when they did not have to. Some of them are standing in a federal courtroom this fall, and some of them we lost, more of them in the last 2 years than the game has lost in a long time, which is part of why we are making this one now. Start with the man who turned a smile into an empire. The Guards. Chapter 1. Magic Johnson. The smile that bought the block. In November of 1991, Earvin Johnson stood at a podium in Inglewood, California, and told the world he had contracted HIV, and a great many people watching that broadcast privately assumed they were watching a man say goodbye. He is 66 years old. Forbes put his net worth this spring at about $1.6 billion. Sit with the size of that for a second, because the number is not the interesting part. The interesting part is where it came from. Magic Johnson earned roughly $40 million playing basketball, which was real money in the 80s and is a rounding error now. Everything else, every dollar past that $40 million, he made after the diagnosis, after the press conference, after the part of the story where the world had already written the ending. Magic Johnson Enterprises started in 1987, and the thesis was so simple it sounds obvious now and sounded ridiculous then. Put good businesses in black neighborhoods, not charity. Businesses, movie theaters in Baldwin Hills, Starbucks in Harlem, hundreds of franchise locations, coffee and burgers and screens, in the places every corporate site selection team in America had drawn a red line around. Today, the crown jewel is not a storefront at all. It is a 60% controlling stake in Equitrust, a financial services company with more than $26 billion under management. He holds ownership pieces of the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Los Angeles Sparks, Los Angeles Football Club, and the Washington Commanders. He is one of a very small number of American athletes to cross into billionaire territory, and the only one who did it after being told in public at 32 years old that his body had already turned on him. And the advocacy never stopped. The Magic Johnson Foundation has been working on HIV awareness and testing for more than 30 years, largely in the communities where the diagnosis still carries the most silence. The point guard's whole gift was seeing the floor a half second before anybody else did. He is still doing it. He just moved the floor. Chapter 2, Isiah Thomas, the man who would not sit down. If you want to understand Isiah Thomas, do not start with the championships. Start with a Tuesday in late 2024 when a 63-year-old man sat down in front of a camera on a podcast hosted by his old rival Mark Jackson and said plainly that he had Bell's palsy. "That is what you see," he said. "That is why I look like this." He did not cancel anything. He went on NBA TV the very next night. The condition affects the facial nerve, it is usually temporary, and it is not remotely life-threatening. And none of that is the point. The point is that a man whose entire public identity was built on a smile that hit a knife, the sweetest face in the roughest league of the century, chose to go on television with that face not working properly rather than disappear for a month. "I am showing up," he said. "I am not taking off." He is 65, and when he is not talking basketball, he is selling champagne, which is a sentence that requires explanation. Thomas has owned and operated Shirlin, a French champagne house, since 2015. This is not a celebrity label slapped on somebody else's bottle. He has spent a decade in the business. And this past winter, he expanded it in a direction nobody predicted, launching a premium kosher champagne line with the Shirlin House, timed to Passover, unveiled at a wine event in New Jersey in early February, and then, 1 week later, at the Palace in Detroit. Of course, at the Palace. Where else would Isiah Thomas throw a party? The kid from the west side of Chicago, who won 2 titles in Detroit, is 65, on television, on the shelf, and refusing on principle to be looked at less. Chapter 3. John Stockton, the quiet man in the loud fight. For 19 seasons, John Stockton did the least interesting thing possible as spectacularly as it has ever been done. He passed the basketball. 15,806 times he passed it to somebody who scored, which is more times than any human being ever has, by a margin so wide that the record is not going to be broken in the lifetime of anybody listening to this. He wore short shorts a decade after they went out of style. He gave a total of about 4 interesting quotes in 2 decades. And then, in his 60s, John Stockton became a public litigant. Here is the record, told carefully, because it deserves care. During and after the pandemic, Stockton became a prominent public skeptic of COVID-19 vaccines. In 2022, he joined a lawsuit alongside 2 doctors and an advocacy organization against the Washington Medical Commission and the state attorney general, arguing that the commission's discipline of physicians over public statements violated the First Amendment. A federal judge dismissed it, the Ninth Circuit affirmed the dismissal, and in early May of this year, the Supreme Court of the United States declined to hear the case, which ends it. We are not going to litigate the medicine here. That is not what this book is for, and it would not be honest of us to pretend a retrospective on basketball players is the right room for it. What we will say is the shape of the thing, because the shape is genuinely surprising. The most private superstar of his generation, a man who spent 20 years actively avoiding a microphone, spent his 60s in federal court over speech, lost at every level, and pursued it all the way to the last door in the American legal system before it closed. He is 64. He lives in Spokane, Washington, where he was born, where he went to high school, where he went to college, and where he has coached kids. In an era where every retired star relocates to Miami or Los Angeles, John Stockton went precisely nowhere, which may be the most John Stockton fact in existence. Chapter 4. Allen Iverson, the man who won the argument. For about 15 years, Allen Iverson was the argument. He was the argument about cornrows and tattoos and the dress code. He was the argument about the crossover and about practice and about whether a 6-foot guard weighing 165 pounds had any business driving into a lane full of 7-footers, which he did every night and got up from, mostly. There were grown men on television in 1997 who said with total confidence that Allen Iverson was bad for basketball. He is 50 years old and he won. Completely. Look at the league now. And here is the delicious part. Allen Iverson is a corporate executive. He is the vice president of basketball at Reebok, a brand he has been attached to since he was a rookie, and his boss is Shaquille O'Neal, who is Reebok's president of basketball. 2 men who spent a decade trying to physically prevent one another from scoring now share an org chart and a P&L. Somewhere there is a slide deck with both their names on it. The other thing that happened is that he wrote it down. In October of 2025, Iverson published a memoir called Misunderstood, and it was a New York Times bestseller inside of a week. He picked the title himself, and it is doing a lot of work. He has also said publicly that he would like a formal role with the Philadelphia 76ers, the franchise he defined, which as of this recording has not happened. He also joined an ownership group in a beverage venture this past year, and he still travels, still gets treated like a head of state in basketball countries, and headlined a festival in Perth, Australia in January. The man they said was bad for the game is now the game's most beloved living argument. He never changed. Everybody else did. Chapter 5. Gary Payton, the Glove and the Missing Team. Gary Payton talked more trash than anyone who has ever played professional basketball, and the reason it was not obnoxious is that he backed every syllable. 9-time All-Defensive First Team, the only point guard in the history of the league to be named Defensive Player of the Year. They called him the Glove, and he earned it in the most literal way available by making sure the man he was assigned to never once had a comfortable evening. He is 58, and he is still coaching, which is the part people miss. Not in the NBA, in a gym. He spent 3 seasons coaching at a small college in Oakland, and in the fall of 2024, he took the men's job at the College of Alameda, a junior college in the Bay Area where he grew up. He also coaches the Boston Ball Hogs in the Big Three, the 3-on-3 league that ran its season this summer on CBS. But the thing Gary Payton actually wants, he has been saying out loud for years, and this spring it moved from fantasy to timeline. The National Basketball Association has approved expansion, and Seattle, which lost the Supersonics in 2008 in one of the ugliest civic divorces in American sports, is expected to get its team back for the 2028-2029 season. Payton, who is the greatest Sonic who ever lived, has made no secret that he intends to be involved, and he is close to one of the ownership groups pursuing it. Asked about the return this spring, he called it really big, which from Gary Payton counts as restraint. 18 years that city has been carrying a grudge and a green jersey. The loudest man in franchise history has been waiting the whole time. Chapter 6. Penny Hardaway, the hometown contract. And Fernie Hardaway was, for about 4 seasons, one of the 5 best basketball players alive, and then his knees took it, and the sport moved on to arguing about what he could have been. It is one of the great unfinished sentences in the game's history. He is 55, and he is the head basketball coach at the University of Memphis, in the city he is from, at the program he starred for, which is either the most romantic job in college sports or the most dangerous one, depending on the week. This past season was the dangerous kind. Memphis went 13-19. That is the most losses the program has taken in a season since 1970, and the first losing year of Hardaway's tenure. And by February, the speculation about his job was loud enough to hear from the parking lot. In March, the university announced he was staying for a 9th season. Then it dismantled his staff around him. 4 assistants and the strength coach were not retained. In April, the program hired its first ever general manager, a man named Gabriel Harris who had run a championship G League front office, which tells you exactly how the modern college game now works. He is under contract through the 27-28 season. The buyout, if they had fired him, was reported at roughly $7.2 million. Here is what makes Penny Hardaway worth your attention rather than your pity. He did not have to do this. He is a wealthy man who could have spent the rest of his life as a beloved ghost, appearing at halftime, waving. Instead, he took the hardest possible job in the one town where failing at it would be witnessed by everyone he has ever known. That is not a legacy play. That is a man who wanted the whistle. Chapter 7. Steve Nash, the Canadian who is everywhere. Steve Nash won 2 Most Valuable Player awards and never reached a finals, which is the kind of fact that gets a man argued about forever. He is 52 now, and the argument has been settled by simple observation. Everybody wants him in the room. Count the rooms. In September of 2025, the Phoenix Suns brought him back as a senior advisor, and he has been on the practice floor since training camp, working with Devin Booker in the building where he spent the best years of his career. He is an analyst for Amazon Prime Video's NBA coverage, which launched its first season this year and carried him through the playoffs. He co-hosts Mind the Game with LeBron James, now in its 3rd season, a podcast where 2 extremely high basketball IQs talk to each other for an hour with no interest whatsoever in whether you can follow it. And then there is soccer, which is the part of Steve Nash people forget is not a hobby. He is a co-owner of the Vancouver Whitecaps in Major League Soccer and a co-owner of RCD Mallorca in Spain's top division. The Whitecaps piece is currently a genuine mess. The ownership group put the club up for sale at the end of 2024. The sale has not closed as of this recording. The stadium lease at BC Place runs out at the end of this year, and the commissioner of Major League Soccer has publicly called the situation untenable, with relocation floated as early as 2027. Nash has been candid that top-level sports ownership has moved past people like him. "It is a billionaire's game now," he said. "A point guard's job is to be in 6 places at once and make it look calm." He never stopped. Chapter 8. Jason Kidd, the man between jobs. For most of the last 5 years, this chapter would have been simple. Jason Kidd coached the Dallas Mavericks, took them to a Western Conference Finals in 2022 and to the NBA Finals in 2024, and looked like a man who would be doing that job for a decade. Then Dallas traded Luka Doncic, and everything downstream of that decision fell apart. The Mavericks went 26-56 this past season. In May, roughly 2 weeks after the franchise hired Masai Ujiri to run basketball operations, Jason Kidd and the Mavericks parted ways. It was announced as mutual. He finished his Dallas tenure at 205 wins and 205 losses, which is a strangely poetic number for a man whose entire playing career was about balance, and he walked away with 4 years and more than $40 million still owed on the contract. He is 53, and as of this recording, he does not have a job. That is not a tragedy, and it is not permanent. He is a Hall of Fame point guard who has taken a team to the finals, and the industry consensus is that he is the best available coach in basketball. The reporting this summer has been about whether he sits out a year and takes the pick of next spring's openings, or takes a phone call in December from a team that has already given up on somebody else. It is worth noting that this is one of the few chapters in this book that may be wrong by the time you hear it. That is the job of a coach. The whole profession is a series of temporary addresses. Chapter 9. Chauncey Billups, Mr. Big Shot, and the Fall. We come now to the hardest chapter in this book, and we are going to do it the way an American is supposed to do it, which is carefully and with the presumption of innocence stated out loud and meant. Chauncey Billups was the finals' most valuable player of the 2004 Detroit Pistons, the last team to win a championship without a superstar, and they called him Mr. Big Shot because of what he did in the final 90 seconds of close games. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2024. He had been the head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers for 4 seasons. On the 23rd of October, 2025, one day after Portland's season opener, federal agents arrested him. He was charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering in connection with an alleged illegal poker operation that prosecutors say was run with organized crime involvement and rigged using altered shuffling machines and hidden technology. Prosecutors allege Billups served as what they called a face card, a celebrity used to draw wealthy players to the table. He is one of 31 defendants. Now hear the rest of it, because the rest of it matters just as much. Chauncey Billups has pleaded not guilty. He was released on a $5 million bond secured by his home in Colorado. He has denied wrongdoing publicly. He has not been convicted of anything. A federal indictment is an accusation, and in this country, an accusation is where the process starts, not where it ends. His trial has been set for the 2nd of November this year, though prosecutors have asked to push it to January over the sheer volume of evidence, so that date may move. He has been on leave from the National Basketball Association since the arrest. Portland moved on around him. An interim coach took the team to its first playoff berth in 5 years and then left for Chicago, and in June, the Blazers, under new ownership, hired a new head coach. Whatever the courts decide, that particular chair is not being held for him. He turns 50 next month. He is entitled to his day in court, and we will not pretend to know what happens in it. Chapter 10. Stephon Marbury, the prophet of the $15 shoe. Stephon Marbury was supposed to be the greatest player ever to come out of Coney Island, which in New York City basketball terms is a sentence with actual weight behind it. What happened instead is one of the strangest and most redemptive arcs in the sport. The New York years did not work, and he has been unusually honest about why. Speaking on a podcast this year, Marbury said he was super depressed during his time with the Knicks, and that the depression is what eventually drove him to leave the country. Those are his words about his own life, and we are going to leave them exactly where he put them. What he did next is the part that should be taught. He went to China, and rather than collecting a paycheck in a foreign league the way dozens of Americans have, he won 3 championships in Beijing, became a genuine national figure, got a statue and a postage stamp, and then coached in the Chinese Basketball Association for 4 years. He is 49, and he has made a very loud return to the New York conversation. When the Knicks won the championship this June, their first since 1973, and the city threw what officials expected to be its largest ticker tape parade ever, Marbury was one of the loudest voices in the run-up, having long since reconciled with the franchise. He also spent the finals demanding on a podcast that Victor Wembanyama publicly apologized to Jalen Brunson for a shove. "Until you say sorry publicly," Marbury said, "you have got to make a public apology." "All New Yorkers were mad," he said, "because you touched the king of the North." That is a 50-year-old man defending his city's point guard like it is 1996 on the handball courts. Some things do not leave you, and he says the shoe is coming back. The Starberry, the basketball sneaker he put out in 2006 for $15 because he had watched families in his neighborhood go without so a kid could have the right shoes, turns 20 this year. Marbury has said he intends to relaunch it. "Now, with all that I have learned," he said, "I can put everything together and do it all over again with a way better structure." That shoe was one of the genuinely moral acts in the history of the sneaker business. It deserves a second life. Chapter 11. Mark Jackson. The podcast is the pulpit. Mark Jackson is 4th all-time in assists, coached the Golden State Warriors to the doorstep of the dynasty, and got fired 1 year before it arrived, and spent a decade as one of the most recognizable voices in basketball broadcasting. Then, in August of 2023, ESPN laid him off with 2 years left on his contract, alongside his broadcast partner, Jeff Van Gundy, in a round of cuts that had nothing to do with either man's work. He is 61, and what he did was refuse to wait for permission. He built his own show. The Mark Jackson Show, which he hosts with his son, has become one of the places in the basketball media landscape where things actually happen. It is where Isiah Thomas chose to disclose his Bell's palsy diagnosis. That is not a small thing. When a proud man decides to say something difficult about his own body, he picks the room. Isiah Thomas picked Mark Jackson's room. He has not coached in the National Basketball Association since 2014, which remains one of the odder facts in the profession, and he has said little about it publicly. When he left ESPN, he thanked God, who he said has always sustained him, and that was more or less that. Hand down, man down. He just built his own gym. Chapter 12. Muggsy Bogues, the shortest man in the room. Tyrone Bogues is 5'3". He played 14 seasons in the National Basketball Association. Every single thing about that sentence is impossible, and all of it is true. And if you were a small kid in the 90s, he was not a novelty to you. He was proof. He is 61, and he never left Charlotte. He works for the Hornets as an ambassador and special advisor, which in his case is not a ceremonial title so much as a description of what he was always going to be doing anyway. Here is what he was doing yesterday, not last year. Yesterday, the 15th of August, 2026, the Muggsy Bogues Family Foundation ran its back-to-school event at a Baptist church on the west side of Charlotte. Families drove through and were handed groceries, water, and backpacks. A regional grocery chain donated the food. That is a Saturday in August. There is no camera crew that matters, no anniversary, no jersey retirement. There is a 61-year-old man in a parking lot in West Charlotte handing a backpack through a car window. He grew up in the Baltimore projects. He has spoken about losing his sister. He was told his entire life that he was too small for every next level, and he kept showing up to the next level anyway. And the whole of that story is now pointed at a folding table in a church lot. 5'3", still the biggest presence in the building. Chapter 13, Baron Davis, the man with 6 business cards. Baron Davis had the best beard in basketball and one of the 4 or 5 most famous dunks in playoff history. over Andrei Kirilenko in a series where his 8-seed Warriors took down a 67-win Dallas team, which remains the loudest single week the Bay Area has ever had. He is 47, and it is genuinely difficult to describe what he does now, because the answer is everything. He runs a production and investment operation and has for years, with a portfolio of media and consumer ventures. He hosts an interview series for the Las Vegas Raiders, which came about because he grew up in Los Angeles worshiping the Raiders of the 80s. He competed on Dancing with the Stars in the fall of 2025, went out in the second week after a cha-cha, and appeared to enjoy every second of it. And this past June, he signed with a Hollywood talent agency for representation across film, television, publishing, branding, and voiceover, which is what a person does when the list of things they are doing has become long enough to require an agent to keep track of it. There is a version of the post-basketball life that is about protecting the legend. Baron Davis is running the opposite experiment. He is willing to be bad at things on television. The dunk is not going anywhere. Everything else is up for grabs. Chapter 14, Kenny Anderson. The comeback nobody scouted. Kenny Anderson was the best high school point guard in America, a New York City legend before he could legally drive, and the second pick in the 1991 draft. He played 14 seasons. And then, like a lot of men who peaked at 19, he spent his 40s working out what a person is for. In February of 2019, at 48 years old, he had a stroke. He was in the hospital for several days and then went into rehabilitation. He lost part of the vision in his right eye. He had untreated high cholesterol and high blood pressure and had not known it, and he said so publicly afterward, over and over, to anyone who would listen, because he had watched what almost happened. He recovered. He coached at Fisk University, a historically black school in Nashville, for 6 seasons before stepping down in 2024. And he has been extraordinarily open, well before the stroke, about the drinking and the drift and the long, unglamorous middle of his life. There is a documentary about it, made in 2017, and the title is The Whole Thesis. Basketball is easy, it says. Life is hard. He turns 56 in October. What we can tell you for certain is that he is alive, that he told people what happened to him so that other men would get their numbers checked, and that a man who was famous at 15 has spent his 50s being useful. Need wings. Chapter 15, Michael Jordan, the greatest and the one interview. Michael Jordan is 63 years old and worth roughly $4.3 billion. And the reason the second number keeps growing is that he stopped being a basketball player a long time ago and became an asset class. He sold his majority stake in the Charlotte Hornets in 2023 at a valuation around $3 billion, keeping a minority piece. His shoe still outsells the entire signature footwear output of every active player combined, more than 2 decades after he last played a game. And the thing that has genuinely occupied him is a race team. 2311 Racing, which Jordan co-owns with Denny Hamlin, spent more than a year suing NASCAR under federal antitrust law over the sports charter system, which is the closest thing stock car racing has to a franchise. Jordan sat in the front row through 8 days of trial. In December, the two sides settled, and 2311 and its co-plaintiff got their charters back for this season. Then the team went out and won 4 of the first 6 races of the year with Tyler Reddick driving. He is competitive in a courtroom the way he was competitive at cards, which anyone who has ever played him will tell you is not an exaggeration. Now the strange part. In May of 2025, NBC announced that Michael Jordan was joining its coverage as the National Basketball Association returned to the network under the title Special Contributor. Basketball people lost their minds. Jordan does not do television. Jordan does not explain himself. The prospect of him breaking down a game live, weekly, was the single most anticipated broadcasting story in years. What actually happened is that he sat for one interview. He taped a long conversation at his home with Mike Tirico, reportedly the better part of 2 hours, and NBC cut it into short segments and released them across the season under the banner MJ, Insights to Excellence. The first aired in October. There were no live studio appearances, no game commentary, no reaction to anything that happened on any given night. Just a man in a chair, filmed once, doled out in pieces. The reaction was not kind, and by January, Tirico himself publicly acknowledged it had not been what people wanted. Here is what Jordan actually said in that one interview about why he did it at all. "I have an obligation to the game of basketball," he said, as a basketball player, to be able to pass on messages of success and dedication to the game of basketball. He meant it. He also, characteristically, did it entirely on his own terms, once, on tape, in his own house. The most competitive man in the history of American sport still will not give you a single possession he did not choose to give you. Chapter 16. Scottie Pippen selling the artifacts. Scottie Pippen was the best second banana in the history of team sports and has spent 30 years being told so, which is a compliment that arrives with a small knife in it. 6 championships, named to the 50 greatest players list, one of the 2 or 3 finest defensive forwards the game has produced. He is 60, and in March of this year, he did something that felt like a punctuation mark. He sold the collection. Through Sotheby's beginning the 2nd of March, Scottie Pippen put his career on the auction block. Jerseys, championship hardware, the material archive of the Chicago Bulls dynasty as experienced from the second locker over. Athletes sell memorabilia for all kinds of reasons, and it is not our business to guess at his. But there is something undeniably final about a man deciding that the objects have done their work. Otherwise, he is doing what a great many Hall of Famers do, which is speak. He is headlining a manufacturing industry conference in Chicago in September, which is the sort of booking that pays extremely well and that nobody outside the room ever hears about. He has spent recent years being publicly and at times harshly revisionist about the Jordan era and about the way The Last Dance told it. Some of that landed badly. Some of it was a man who has been described as a supporting actor for 3 decades finally saying out loud that he did not care for the billing. You are allowed to be the second best player on the greatest team ever assembled and still want your name said correctly. Chapter 17. Clyde Drexler. The commissioner speaks up. Clyde Drexler glided. That is the word, and it is the only one, and everybody who watched him used it. He is 64, a Hall of Famer, a Dream Teamer, an Olympic gold medalist, and a champion with Houston, and for years he has been the commissioner of the Big Three, the 3-on-3 professional league. But the reason Clyde Drexler is in this book with something to say is that in May, he said it. Portland, the city where Drexler became Clyde the Glide, sold its franchise. The new owner bought the Trailblazers for a reported $4.25 billion in March, and by mid-May had laid off more than 70 people on the business side of the organization. Not players, ticket staff, marketing, the people who work in a building. Drexler, who has spent 40 years being politic in public, was not politic. When you are running a billion-dollar industry, he said, you cannot act like you do not have any money. And then he added the part that will follow that owner around. I think the NBA has set a standard for every franchise. He did not have to say it. He has no financial stake in the outcome and nothing to gain. He said it because 70 people in the city that made him lost their jobs 3 months after the building changed hands. Chapter 18. Dominique Wilkins. The Human Highlight film, 27 years in. Dominique Wilkins is 66 years old, and he has now been living with type 2 diabetes for longer than he played professional basketball. He was diagnosed not long after he retired. He has said the diagnosis frightened him badly and that he lost 35 pounds in about 2 months and never put it back on. And rather than treating it as a private matter, which he was entitled to do, he made it a second career. He speaks about it constantly at health conferences and to patient groups. And he gave a keynote this year about what 27 years of managing the condition has actually taught him. That is not a health crisis. That is the opposite. That is a man who found out something was wrong in his 40s and then spent a quarter century in front of rooms telling other people how to catch it earlier. The rest of the life is Atlanta, which he never left. He is a vice president with the Hawks and a television analyst on their broadcasts, which means the greatest dunker of the pre-Jordan era spends his winters describing basketball to the city he spent his 20s electrifying. Neek never won a championship. He was robbed in 1988 in a dunk contest that people still argue about in bars, and he is the last person on earth who seems bothered by any of it. Chapter 19. Reggie Miller. 8 points in 9 seconds and a bicycle. Reggie Miller turned 61 in 8 days. For 2 decades, he was the most detestable man in the state of New York and the most beloved in Indiana, which are the same fact viewed from 2 angles. Then he spent about 20 years at TNT, becoming improbably one of the warmest and best-liked analysts in the sport. Last year he moved. When the National Basketball Association returned to NBC, Reggie Miller went with it as the network's lead game analyst, working alongside Mike Tirico. He fronted the launch of Sunday Night Basketball at Madison Square Garden, which somebody at NBC clearly enjoyed arranging. And this spring, he called the entire Western Conference Finals, San Antonio against Oklahoma City, from the lead chair. Note what that is. Reggie Miller left the network where he became a broadcaster at 60 to take a bigger job at a network rebuilding a basketball operation from nothing. That is not a man coasting toward a pension. And then there is the bicycle, which is the best unexpected fact in this entire book. Reggie Miller is a serious, competitive mountain bike racer, not a celebrity who owns a nice bike. He founded a racing team. He has served on the board of directors of USA Cycling, and he has raced in national championship events in his age category against people who have never watched a basketball game in their lives and have no idea who the tall guy is. 8 points in 9 seconds. And then he took up a sport where nobody claps. Chapter 20, Grant Hill, the most powerful man in American basketball. There is a version of Grant Hill's story that is sad, and everybody knows it. He was going to be the next one. Duke, 2 national championships, co-rookie of the year, and then an ankle injury in 2000 that required 5 surgeries and took the best 4 years of his career. Throw that version away. It is obsolete. Grant Hill is 53, and he is the managing director of the United States men's national basketball team. He is the person who decides which Americans play for their country. He built the roster that won gold in Paris in 2024, and he is now assembling the group for the 2027 World Cup. There is no more powerful non-employed role in American basketball. He is also simultaneously an NBA game analyst for NBC, which he joined for this past season. He called the Final Four on CBS this spring alongside Ian Eagle and Bill Raftery, roughly his 11th consecutive Final Four in a broadcast booth. He is a part owner of the Atlanta Hawks. He is a co-owner of Orlando City and the Orlando Pride in soccer. He is part of the ownership group of the Baltimore Orioles. He is a trustee of Duke University. He was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, which is not a sports honor at all. He does not call Hawks games because he owns part of the Hawks, and he has been asked more than once whether all of this is a conflict, and he has been sanguine about walking the lines. The man who lost 4 years to an ankle got the whole rest of the sport instead. Chapter 21. Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady, the cousins. They are cousins, people forget that. Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady, 2 of the most physically gifted wings the game ever produced, were briefly teammates in Toronto in the late 90s in our family, and their post-basketball lives have converged again in a way that neither could have scripted. Vince Carter is 49. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2024 and had his number 15 retired by Toronto that November and by Brooklyn in January of the year after. He is now a studio analyst on NBC's basketball coverage, frequently sitting beside Carmelo Anthony, and he also works part-time as a color commentator on Raptors broadcasts, which is a lovely resolution to a relationship with that city that was genuinely poisonous for about 15 years. Tracy McGrady is 47, and he built a league. The Ones Basketball League is McGrady's one-on-one professional circuit, an idea he started chasing in 2022. And this year he relaunched it as Battle of the Cities, 32 athletes, a multi-week format, kicking off in Orlando in May and running into July. It took a growth investment from an outside sports firm. Vince Carter is one of the people backing it. And then there is the thing they did together. In the last couple of years, Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady both became limited partners in the Buffalo Bills of the National Football League, part of a group of 10 investors who are the first minority owners in that franchise's history. It is a huge honor, Carter said, to join this historic Bills organization. 2 cousins from Florida, one of whom jumped over a 7-footer at the Olympics, now own pieces of a football team in Western New York. Chapter 22. Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett. The Big Three yesterday. We are going to take these three together because last night they took themselves together. On Saturday, the 15th of August, 2026, at Symphony Hall in Springfield, Massachusetts, Doc Rivers was enshrined in the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. His presenters were Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett, the Boston Big Three standing on a stage together for their coach. If you followed that team, you know why that is not a routine sentence. Those three men and that coach spent 2008 winning a championship and then spent large parts of the following 15 years in various states of estrangement, publicly, over Ray Allen's departure to Miami. There were years when the reunion photographs did not include him. They put on suits and stood up for Doc. Ray Allen is 51. He holds the record for three-pointers made in playoff history and hit the most consequential shot of the 2013 finals. And he has spent recent years coaching at the high school level in Miami and raising sons who play. He is the most private of the three, and there is little current to report, which is very much his choice. Paul Pierce is 48, and he co-hosts a weekly podcast segment with Garnett called Ticket and the Truth, which is exactly the show two of them would make. He remains one of the more entertainingly reckless opinion havers in basketball media. Kevin Garnett is 50, and his news is enormous. In December, Garnett returned to the Minnesota Timberwolves as a team ambassador, ending a bitter estrangement from the franchise that had lasted years under previous ownership. And this past Friday, 2 days ago, with the release of the schedule, the Timberwolves announced that they will retire his number 21 on the 28th of February next year, when Boston comes to town. He will be only the second player in franchise history to have his number raised. Everybody said forgiveness was impossible. 3 of them presented a coach on Saturday. One of them is getting his number retired by a team he swore he was done with. Chapter 23. Dwyane Wade. The part he did not have to tell you. In December of 2023, Dwyane Wade had a tumor removed from his right kidney. About 40% of the kidney came out with it. The tumor was cancerous, and he did not say a word about it publicly for more than a year. When he finally did on his own podcast in January of 2025, the detail that stayed with people was how he found out. He had gone in for a full body scan for essentially preventive reasons, and they found something nobody was looking for. He is 44 years old, and this is what he said about it this July. At 44 years old, he said, "I should not have had cancer surgery already." He is reported cancer-free, and he has spent the 18 months since telling the story turning it into an argument, which is that men, and particularly black men, do not get scanned, do not go in, do not check, and that he is only sitting there because he happened to. The rest of the life is bright. He is a minority owner of the Utah Jazz. He is a media figure, a producer, and half of one of the more visible marriages in American entertainment. And in July, the town of Robbins, Illinois, where his mother is from and where he spent formative years, renamed a boulevard after him. There is a difficult thing in his family right now. His son Zaire was arrested in California in June and charged in July with a felony domestic violence offense. That case is pending. No one has been convicted of anything, and it is not our story to tell. We mention it only because we promised you the record, and we do not selectively edit it. Anything further belongs to that family into a courtroom. Chapter 24. Carmelo Anthony, the Hall of Famer at the desk. Carmelo Anthony scored 28,289 points, won a national championship as a 19-year-old freshman, and spent about a decade being blamed for things that were not entirely his fault. In September of 2025, he was enshrined in the Basketball Hall of Fame, presented by Allen Iverson and Dwyane Wade, and the argument mercifully ended. He is 42. He joined NBC as an NBA studio analyst last October, announced in one of the great pieces of network scheduling during the Kentucky Derby broadcast. He is in studio at least once a week through the playoffs, often beside Vince Carter. He also hosts a podcast called 7 p.m. in Brooklyn, which has become one of the more genuinely enjoyable basketball shows going. largely because Melo is funny in a dry way that his playing career never revealed. He has had the projected #1 draft pick on as a guest. He has had Jeremy Lin on. And the thing that has clearly consumed him most is that his son, Keon, just finished his freshman year at Syracuse, playing for Melo's old program under a new head coach who happens to be Melo's old teammate. Anthony has been strikingly unsentimental in public about how hard that first year was and about the state of college basketball, the money, the transfer portal, the churn. The man who was the last great one and done superstar watching his own son go through a version of college basketball that would be unrecognizable to him. Chapter 25, Metta Sandiford-Artest, the assistant coach. He has had 3 names in public life, and we will use the one he legally holds, Metta Sandiford-Artest, while acknowledging that most of you know him as Ron Artest and then as Metta World Peace. He is 46, and the news is 1 month old, and it is wonderful. In July, Cal State Los Angeles announced that Metta Sandiford-Artest had joined its women's basketball program as associate head coach. Not the men's team, the women's team. He is doing it alongside Michael Cooper, the great Lakers defender, who took over the Cal State men's program in April. Think about the distance covered. This is a man whose name for an entire generation was attached to the ugliest night in the history of the National Basketball Association, and who spent the 20 years since doing the slow public work of becoming something else, including becoming one of the loudest voices in sports on mental health, at a time when there were almost no loud voices at all. He wants more. He campaigned openly on social media in February for the head coaching job at Kansas State, despite having no head coaching experience, saying it was one he found very interesting. He says he nearly got the Knicks job. He publicly applied to run the Mavericks front office. None of that came off, and there is something disarming about a man who simply says out loud, repeatedly in public, that he wants the job. He is going to spend this winter in a small gym in Los Angeles coaching women's college basketball, and he sounds happy about it. Chapter 26, Rasheed Wallace. Ball do not lie. Rasheed Wallace holds the single-season record for technical fouls, which he will tell you he earned. And he was also a vastly better and more thoughtful basketball player than the highlight reel of officials pointing at him would suggest. A champion in Detroit in 2004. A 4-time All-Star. A man whose 2 most famous words, "Ball do not lie," entered the American vocabulary. He is 51, and he turns 52 next month. And he is the hardest man in this book to locate. Here is what is verifiable. In December of 2025, he was inducted into the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame in Detroit in a class alongside Chris Chelios and Clarissa Shields. He co-hosts a podcast with his old teammate Bonzi Wells. He coached at various times as an assistant with the Pistons, as a high school head coach in Durham, North Carolina, as an assistant at Memphis, and as an assistant with the Lakers. But that Lakers staff was dismissed in 2024, and he is not there now. What he is doing this month we cannot tell you because nobody has reported it, and we are not going to invent it for the sake of a tidy paragraph. That is allowed. A man is permitted to go quiet. Rasheed Wallace spent 15 years being the loudest person in every arena he entered, and he appears to have decided that was enough. And there is a kind of dignity in a legend who does not need you to know where he is. The big men. Chapter 27, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The mind that would not stop. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is 79 years old. He held the all-time scoring record for 39 years. He has now spent longer as a writer than he spent as a basketball player, which is a fact he would probably like you to lead with. In February at All-Star Weekend in Los Angeles, the league gave him its Lifetime Achievement Award. There is also a trophy that carries his name, the Social Justice Champion Award, given annually to a player whose work off the floor matters, and he sits on the committee that picks it. The writing has never stopped. He published 2 books last year, one of them a graphic novel, and he files commentary weekly on his own platform, on politics, on jazz, on history, on race, on movies. He is prolific in a way that would be impressive for a full-time columnist 30 years younger. The body has been the hard part. He is a 2-time cancer survivor, chronic myeloid leukemia, and prostate cancer. In December of 2023, he fell at a concert in Los Angeles and broke his hip and needed surgery. He has been seen since using a wheelchair at times and a cane at others. 7'2", 79 years old, moving carefully, and still filing copy every week. The skyhook was unblockable, so apparently is the man. Chapter 28. Hakeem Olajuwon. The dream goes to Guyana. Hakeem Olajuwon is 63, and the most interesting thing he did this past year is one almost nobody in America noticed. In late November, Olajuwon bought 2 luxury residences in a development in Guyana on the East Bank corridor outside Georgetown. It was covered heavily by the Guyanese press and barely at all here. He said the decision followed a series of visits over the previous year, during which he had been looking at both real estate and the country's oil and gas sector, and he signaled interest in future joint ventures with the developer. Understand why that is not a random news item. Hakeem Olajuwon is Nigerian. He came to the United States at 17, having barely played basketball, and became arguably the most technically skilled center in the history of the sport. He has also spent his entire post-playing life as a serious and quiet real estate investor in Houston, buying property outright and holding it, famously avoiding debt for religious reasons. So a Nigerian-born Houston real estate investor has now made his first property purchase outside the United States, in a small South American nation that has become, in about 5 years, one of the fastest growing economies on earth because of an offshore oil discovery. The dream shake was about seeing 3 moves ahead while everybody else reacted to the first one. He is 63 and still doing it, in a market most American investors could not find on a map. Chapter 29. Patrick Ewing. The professor goes back to Washington. Patrick Ewing turned 64 11 days ago, and he has just taken a job that closes a 30-year circle. The New York Knicks won the championship this June, their first since 1973. Ewing, who is the greatest player in that franchise's modern history and who never won one there, had been working for the team as a basketball ambassador since 2024, which meant he was in the building and on the parade route for the thing he spent 15 years failing to deliver. There is no clean word for what that must have felt like. And then, in July, he left. The Washington Wizards hired Patrick Ewing as an assistant coach for this coming season. Washington, where he played college basketball at Georgetown and became a national figure, where he later returned as head coach and went 75-109 over 6 seasons before being fired in 2023, in a run that was genuinely painful to watch for anybody who loved him. He was paid out on that contract substantially, and he could have retired into ambassadorship in golf. Instead, at 64, he took an assistant coaching job, not a head job, an assistant, on a rebuilding team. Some men chase titles. Patrick Ewing appears to want the work. Chapter 30. David Robinson, the Admiral in Court. David Robinson is the most respectable man ever to play in the National Basketball Association, and it is not particularly close. Naval Academy graduate, 2 championships, 50-point game. And then, in retirement, he founded a school in San Antonio for kids who needed one, and put his own money into it, and it worked. He is 61, and in December, he went to court. Robinson co-founded a private equity firm called Admiral Capital Group in the late 2000s with a former Goldman Sachs banker, and the firm was built with an explicit social commitment, pledging a share of profits to education and lower-income communities. In December of 2025, Robinson and Admiral filed suit in a Texas business court against that co-founder and 2 affiliated entities, alleging breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, conversion, and civil conspiracy, and seeking more than $34 million. The central allegation is that roughly $18 million in refinancing proceeds from a property were diverted away from Admiral's investors. We need to be exact here. Those are allegations. Nothing has been proven. The case is unresolved as of this recording, and David Robinson is the one who brought it, not the one defending it. Note the pattern, though, because we saw it in the football book, too. When the most careful men in sports get taken, they do not go quiet and eat it. They go to the referees with the paperwork. He was inducted into the Texas Business Hall of Fame 2 years ago, only the second professional athlete ever so honored. The Admiral is 61 and still standing in front of the thing. Chapter 31. Shaquille O'Neal, the biggest brand alive. There is an argument that Shaquille O'Neal is the most successful post-career athlete in American history. And the argument is not really about the money, though there is plenty of that. It is about breadth. He is 54. He is the president of basketball at Reebok, a genuine executive title at a brand he helped build as a rookie in 1992, and he got there by being the second largest shareholder in the company that bought Reebok outright for $2.46 billion, a purchase he pushed for. He hired Allen Iverson as his vice president. He signed Angel Reese, who will be the first active player in the Women's Professional League to have a signature Reebok shoe. That is one job. He also has a doctorate. He is a working disc jockey who plays major festivals. He owns restaurant franchises by the dozen. And for a quarter century, he has been the anchor of the best studio show in the history of sports television, alongside Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, and Ernie Johnson. What makes it work is that none of it is defensive. Shaq is not protecting a legacy. He gets dunked on by comedians. He falls over on live television. He plays the fool constantly and deliberately, which is the single most disarming move available to a 7'1", 330-pound man who was, for a 5-year stretch, the most physically dominant athlete on the planet. He was the funniest man in the room and the most terrifying man in the room at the same time. He never had to choose. He still does not. Chapter 32. Alonzo Mourning, the man who keeps surviving things. Alonzo Mourning is 56 years old, and he should not be here, and he knows it better than anybody. In 2000, he was diagnosed with a kidney disease, focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, at the peak of his career. In December of 2003, he received a kidney transplant from his cousin. He came back and won a championship with Miami in 2006, playing on a transplanted kidney, which remains one of the more astonishing things any professional athlete has ever done. Then in 2024, he told the world the second part. He had been diagnosed with stage 3 prostate cancer and had his prostate removed in March of 2023 and had told almost nobody while it was happening. He is reported cancer-free. He is a vice president with the Miami Heat, running player programs and development, a job he has held for about 15 years, and he represented the franchise at the draft lottery in May. But the work that defines him is the advocacy. He is one of the most prominent kidney disease educators in the country, with a particular focus on a gene variant that carries elevated risk in people of West African descent, and he has spent 20 years telling Black men to get their kidney function checked. 2 diagnoses that should have ended him, 23 years apart. He won a ring between them and has spent the time since telling people how to catch it early. Chapter 33. Charles Barkley. Still saying it. Charles Barkley is 63, and he remains the only person in American sports media who can be relied upon to say the true thing on live television, which is why he has outlasted everyone. 2 things have happened to him lately, and one of them is about his body. He lost roughly 60 pounds in 6 months, going from 352 down to the low 290s, and he was completely open about how, which was a prescription weight loss drug. He then became the public face of a telehealth company. Some athletes would have quietly dropped the weight and let people assume discipline. Barkley told everybody exactly what he took, which is entirely consistent with a man who has spent 40 years refusing to perform. The other thing is professional. Inside the NBA, the show he has anchored for a quarter century moved from TNT to ESPN this past season, still produced by the TNT team. And Barkley has not been quiet about the arrangement. ESPN scheduled only about 20 episodes, which is a fraction of what the show used to do, and he has been visibly frustrated. During March Madness this spring, he took a sabbatical from the show to honor his commitments to CBS and TNT in the middle of what was already a strained situation. He says he intends to work about 2 more years and then stop, despite having something like 7 years left on his contract. He has said versions of this before and not done it, and there is no reason to fully believe him now. And then there is the money he gives away, which he never publicizes and which keeps surfacing anyway. $1 million to the Alabama Community College system. $1 million to Auburn women's basketball. He has been doing 7-figure education gifts for years, usually quietly, usually in Alabama, usually to schools nobody else is funding. Terrible, he would say. He is not. Chapter 34. Dennis Rodman, the Hall of Fame and the Daughter. Dennis Rodman is 65 years old, and this year he got inducted into a Hall of Fame. Not the basketball one, which took him in 2011. The wrestling one. In April, at WrestleMania week in Las Vegas, Dennis Rodman entered the WWE Hall of Fame, class of 2026, for a run in the late 90s that a great many basketball purists found embarrassing, and that a great many other people found to be the most entertaining thing on television. He works the convention circuit now, signing autographs, and he is very good at it, because being Dennis Rodman in a room full of people who love Dennis Rodman is a skill he has had since 1995. But that is not the real story of his last 2 years, and we are going to handle the real story carefully. His daughter Trinity Rodman is one of the best soccer players in the world. In January, she re-signed with the Washington Spirit for 3 years at more than $2 million annually, making her the highest paid player in the history of her league. Her father posted the news to his Instagram with a single word: history. Trinity has spoken publicly and painfully about their relationship. On a podcast in late 2024, she said he is not a dad, that maybe by blood he is, but nothing else, and that hearing his voice is painful. Dennis responded publicly and apologized, saying he was sorry for not being the dad she wanted him to be. We are not going to adjudicate a family. We will only say that both of those things happened in public within a few weeks of each other, and that a 65-year-old man apologizing to his adult daughter on the internet is not nothing, and that whether it is enough is entirely and exclusively hers to decide. Chapter 35. Karl Malone, the mailman in Louisiana. Karl Malone is 63, second on the all-time scoring list for 2 decades, and he went home. Not to Utah, where he played for 18 years and where his statue stands. To North Louisiana, where he is from, where he went to college at Louisiana Tech, and where he has built an unglamorous, sprawling business life out of the public eye. Auto dealerships, timber, real estate, restaurants. In August of 2024, he opened a tactical gear and outdoor store in Ruston, Louisiana, which he had apparently been planning for years. He follows the Jazz from a distance and occasionally offers advice about patience with young teams. He has said in a local interview that he wishes his alma mater made him feel more welcome, which is a very particular kind of hurt for a man who put a small Louisiana school on the national map. In this 4th of July weekend, for the country's 250th birthday, Karl Malone and John Stockton got together, and photographs went everywhere. 19 years those two ran the pick and roll. They are the most successful partnership in the history of the sport that never won anything. Both of them are in their 60s now. Both of them live in the small towns they came from. Both of them refuse the whole apparatus of modern celebrity, and both of them are still on a holiday weekend calling each other. Chapter 36. Chris Webber, the Fab Five resolved. Chris Webber is 53, and there are 2 Chris Webber stories, and both of them got a little better this year. The basketball one is Michigan. Webber was the leader of the Fab Five, the 5 freshmen who changed what college basketball looked like and sounded like. And then the relationship with the university collapsed under a booster scandal that resulted in the school disassociating from him for a decade. For 30 years, the greatest ambassador Michigan basketball ever had was not welcome to be one. Reporting this year indicated that Michigan's athletic director privately apologized to him, and there was a Fab Five reunion on a Final Four broadcast this spring, all 5 of them, which had not happened in that setting before. The professional one is broadcasting. Webber returned to calling NCAA tournament games this March, working first and second round games for CBS, with a play-by-play partner making his tournament debut. He had done tournament work from 2015 to 2019 and then left the booth. He is very good at it. He notices things. He has also, since 2022, been in the legal cannabis business in Michigan, a venture built explicitly around social equity and getting ownership into the hands of people from communities that were criminalized during Prohibition. It broke ground on a large facility in Detroit. Where that stands right now, we cannot verify, so we will not pretend to. He went into the Hall of Fame in 2021. It took Michigan a good deal longer. Chapter 37. Ben Wallace, the undrafted Hall of Famer. Nobody drafted Ben Wallace. Not in the first round, not in the second round, not at all. He went to Virginia Union, a small historically black university in Richmond, and in 1996 the entire National Basketball Association passed on him 58 times. He won 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards. He won a championship in 2004 with a Detroit team that had no superstar and beat a Lakers team with 4 Hall of Famers on it. Detroit retired his number 3, and in 2021, the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame inducted him, making Ben Wallace the first fully undrafted player ever enshrined. He is 51 and turns 52 next month, and he has kept the lowest profile of any man in this book. He surfaced this June to talk about the Pistons, who had just had their best season in a very long time before losing in the second round. And he sounded like a man watching a franchise he still considers his finally get good again. There is not much else to report, and that seems to be by design. Some players spend their retirement building a second public life. Ben Wallace, who never once needed the ball, appears to have applied the same philosophy to being famous. The hair is the memory. 20,000 people in Detroit chanting "Ben" over and over for a man who blocked shots and rebounded and did not score. That is the rarest kind of love an arena gives out. Chapter 38. Yao Ming. The ambassador steps down. Yao Ming is 45, and he turns 46 next month, and he has spent the last decade doing something considerably harder than playing center. He ran Chinese basketball. From 2017, Yao was the president of the Chinese Basketball Association, the most powerful figure in the sport in a country of 1.4 billion people, and he took the job as a reformer. In October of 2024, he stepped down, and he was direct about why. The national teams had not met expectations. The men had missed 2 consecutive Olympics and failed to reach the top 16 at 2 consecutive World Cups. He did not spin it. That is a rare thing. A national sporting federation president in any country resigning and saying plainly that the results were not good enough on his watch. His life since has been quieter and more ceremonial. He carried a torch for the Winter Olympics in Milan in February. He speaks at business summits. He has a wine business and an investment vehicle, and a long-standing conservation partnership doing work against the ivory and shark fin trades, which is genuinely among the most effective celebrity conservation campaigns anyone has run. He was the first Chinese player to become a global superstar, the reason an entire generation in China picked up a basketball, and the reason the National Basketball Association has a business in Asia at all. His feet gave out at 30. His usefulness never did. Chapter 39. Shawn Kemp, the Rain Man in the courtroom. Shawn Kemp was the most explosive power forward of the 1990s, the other half of the greatest team Seattle ever had, and one of the most beloved athletes in that city's history. In March of 2023, in a parking lot at the Tacoma Mall in Washington State, Shawn Kemp fired a gun. Here is what is established. Kemp had property stolen, tracked his phone electronically to a vehicle in that parking lot, went there, confronted the people inside, and shots were exchanged. Nobody was hit. He was initially charged with first-degree assault with drive by shooting enhancements. He has always maintained he fired in self-defense, saying someone in the other vehicle shot first. In May of 2025, he pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of second-degree assault. In August of that year, a judge in Pierce County sentenced him to 30 days of electronic home monitoring, 12 months of community custody, and 240 hours of community service. Prosecutors had asked for about 9 months in custody, and afterward they asked the judge to reconsider the sentence as too lenient. As of this recording, we cannot verify that that motion was resolved, so we will not tell you the case is closed. He is 56, and we are going to say the obvious thing plainly, because it is the only useful thing here. A man in his 50s chased down his own stolen property, alone, in a shopping mall parking lot with a gun. Every single part of that decision was avoidable. He is fortunate that the worst version did not happen, and the record now says so permanently. Seattle loved him without reservation. Some of that city still does. Both of those things can be true alongside the paragraph above it. What the money did. There is a thing that happened in professional basketball in the last 25 years that has not happened in any other American sport, and it is worth stopping the book to look at it directly. Basketball players got rich, and then a meaningful number of them got rich a second time at a scale that dwarfs what the game paid them. Michael Jordan is worth over $4 billion. Magic Johnson crossed $1 billion. Junior Bridgman, who averaged 13 points a game and was never an all-star, became a billionaire owning Wendy's franchises and Coca-Cola bottling plants, and eventually bought Ebony and Jet magazines. And when he died last year, he was worth more than most of the superstars of his era. Shaquille O'Neal is an executive at a global footwear brand. Grant Hill owns pieces of 4 professional teams across 3 sports. Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady own part of an NFL franchise. Why basketball? There are real reasons. It is a global sport with 5 players on the floor, so individual identity is unavoidable, and marketing is personal rather than institutional. Players are recognizable, they are unmasked, and they became businesses early. And crucially, the generation that came up in the 80s and 90s watched Magic Johnson be told his life was over at 32, and then watched him build an empire anyway. And that was a lesson delivered at the exact moment they were young enough to learn it. But there is a shadow attached to it, and the shadow is the reason for the next section of this book. For every Junior Bridgman, there is a man who signed for $70 million and could not tell you where it went. The National Basketball Players Association now runs financial education programs. Antoine Walker and Greg Oden both work for a firm that exists specifically to teach athletes about money. That firm has clients because the problem is real. The money is not the story. What people did with the 20 years after the money, that is the story. The harder roads. Chapter 40, Delonte West, 100 Days. We are going to tell this one gently, and we are going to tell you the truth, and those two things are not in conflict. Delonte West played 8 seasons in the National Basketball Association. He was a genuinely good player, a tough defensive guard, a starter on a Cleveland team that went to the finals. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 2008 while he was still playing. The years after basketball have been very hard, and much of the hardship has been photographed, which is its own cruelty. There have been arrests. There have been images circulated that no person should have circulated. In November of 2025, he was found unconscious and intoxicated and was revived with Narcan. In December, he was arrested in Fairfax County, Virginia, accused of assaulting a man and taking about $23. Those charges, robbery and assault, are allegations. He was released to a treatment facility, and his attorney said at the time that he was proud of him for using the process to seek out help. We cannot verify how that case resolved. Now the part we are actually here for. In March of this year, Delonte West posted a video announcing that he was 100 days sober. He said he was in Florida working with a wellness program, and 2 days ago, on the 14th of August, he posted again from West Palm Beach saying he is living a good life. "It is your boy D. West," he said, "former NBA player extraordinaire. Down here in West Palm Beach living a good life. We reach highs in our life," he said. "We reach lows." The video was partly a promotion for a credit repair service, and we tell you that because we tell you everything. Recovery is not a finish line, and 100 days is not a cure, and nobody who has loved an addict needs that explained. But a man who has been photographed at his absolute worst by strangers chose to point a camera at himself and say a good number out loud. That took something. We are pulling for him, and we are not going to pretend to know how it ends. Chapter 41. Antoine Walker, the man who teaches the lesson he paid for. Antoine Walker turned 54 days ago. He made a fortune widely reported at more than $100 million, and in 2010 he filed for bankruptcy, listing roughly $12.7 million in debt against about $4.3 million in assets. There is a version of that story that is a punchline, and it got told as a punchline for about a decade. Here is what he has done since. Antoine Walker became a financial literacy educator. He works as a consultant with a firm that provides financial education to athletes and entertainers. He speaks to rookies. He speaks at universities. And in the last few years, the most useful audience of his career has appeared because college athletes now get paid. And there are 19-year-olds signing endorsement contracts who have never had a bank account. And there is a man available who can stand in front of them and describe in detail exactly how it goes wrong. He also made a documentary about it in 2020, and the title is honest: Gone in an Instant. Very few people are willing to be the cautionary tale on purpose, by name, for a living. Walker gave up the option of ever being asked about anything else. That is a real sacrifice, and it should be counted as one. Chapter 42. Latrell Sprewell, the man who said no. Latrell Sprewell is 55 and turns 56 next month, and he is genuinely difficult to find, and we are not going to invent a location for him. We can tell you the record, which is remarkable and which people misremember. In December of 1997, he choked his head coach at a Golden State practice and was suspended 68 games. He then rebuilt his career in New York, and the 1999 Knicks, an 8 seed, went to the finals with Sprewell as their most exciting player. He was, for about 3 years, one of the most watchable athletes in America. Then, in October of 2004, the Minnesota Timberwolves offered him a 3-year extension worth about $21 million, and he turned it down and said, in public, that he had a family to feed. It became one of the most mock sentences ever uttered by a professional athlete. He never played another game after April of 2005. He was 34. What followed was a long financial unwinding, a yacht repossessed by a federal marshal and auctioned, a home in the Milwaukee area foreclosed, unpaid state income taxes reported in the millions. We do not know what Latrell Sprewell is doing today. It has not been reported reliably, and we are not going to guess at it. What we know is that he was one of the great combustible talents of his era, and that he said a sentence at the wrong moment that has followed him for 20 years. And it seems worth noting that most of us have said something in a bad week that we would not want played back forever. Chapter 43. Darius Miles, the memoir. Darius Miles went straight from high school in East St. Louis to the 3rd pick in the 2000 draft at 18 years old, and everything about that decision has consequences that took 20 years to fully report. He is 44, and what he does now is talk. He co-hosts a podcast with Quentin Richardson, his old teammate from those young Clippers teams, the two of them doing the head tap celebration that a generation of kids copied. It has run for hundreds of episodes, and it is one of the most successful athlete-hosted shows in the business, largely because the two of them are actually friends and it is impossible to fake that. He also wrote a memoir. It deals with the money and its disappearance, with a bankruptcy, with depression, with the death of his mother, and with open heart surgery. Read that list again. Open heart surgery. A man who was drafted 3rd overall as a teenager for his athleticism. Miles is one of the clearest cases in this book of somebody who was handed enormous money at an age where nobody has the equipment for it, lost it, and then chose to describe the whole thing in detail rather than hide. The podcast is the joyful version. The book is the honest one. He did both. Chapter 44. Vin Baker, the barista who went back. Vin Baker was a 4-time All-Star and an Olympic gold medalist, and he lost a fortune reported at close to $100 million to alcoholism. And in about 2015, he was working behind the counter of a Starbucks in Rhode Island. He has said he was not embarrassed by it, which is the detail that reframes the entire story. He needed a job. He took the job. He learned the business with the intention of running a store. He got sober around 2011. He has been an assistant coach with the Milwaukee Bucks since 2018, working for the franchise where he first became an All-Star. And he founded a recovery center in Milwaukee that carries his name and treats addiction, which is the piece of this that matters most. A man who lost everything to a disease now runs a place that treats the disease in the city where he was famous, while coaching in the arena down the road. We should note that the Bucks changed head coaches this spring, and we cannot confirm the composition of the new staff, so we will say what is certain. Vin Baker has been a Bucks assistant since 2018, and the recovery center is his own. Chapter 45. Jayson Williams, the hardest file. Jayson Williams was an all-star center for the New Jersey Nets and a broadcaster with an easy charm. And in February of 2002, A shotgun in his home discharged and killed a limousine driver named Kostas Christofi, who was 45 years old and who had driven Williams and a group of guests that night. We are going to say Mr. Christofi's name because he is the person in this story who did not get the rest of his life. The legal record, precisely. Williams was acquitted of aggravated manslaughter. He was convicted of evidence tampering. The jury hung on reckless manslaughter. In 2010, he pleaded guilty to aggravated assault, served 27 months, and was released in 2012. He is 58. In the years since, he has been open about alcoholism, and he founded a program that treats addiction through outdoor adventure therapy, skydiving and paddleboarding, and scuba and fishing, run in partnership with a recovery organization in Florida. The theory is that people in early recovery need something to feel, and that adrenaline can be repurposed. We are not in the business of telling you what to think about Jayson Williams. There is a family in New Jersey for whom none of the last 24 years has been redemption, and that is not ours to smooth over. We include him because this book promised the whole record, and because what a man does with the decades after the worst night of his life is a legitimate question, and because the answer in this case is that he has spent them working on the thing that put him there. Chapter 46. Brandon Roy, Garfield High, again. Brandon Roy was Rookie of the Year, a 3-time All-Star, and the best basketball player the city of Seattle ever produced, and his knees were finished by the time he was 27. Not injured, finished. He had no cartilage. He played on bone. He is 42, and this is the best turn in this entire book. He has spent years as the boys' basketball coach at Garfield High School in Seattle, his own high school in the Central District, the neighborhood he is from. In September of 2025, he lost that job after a rival school alleged that his program had improperly recruited a student, with claims involving an apartment, a car, cash, and paid driving lessons. Roy denied it. He said publicly that he had confirmed with his coaches and staff that at no time were any conversations held with the student or family in question. The State Athletic Association reviewed it and did not find a violation. He sat out the entire season anyway while it played out. And then, in June of this year, Seattle Public Schools announced that Brandon Roy was the head coach at Garfield High School again for the coming school year, hired back through the district's normal process, with an interview panel that included school leadership, athletic staff, a student athlete, and a parent. He did not sue anybody. He did not go on a media tour. He waited, was cleared, applied for his own job back like anybody else, sat in front of a panel that included a teenager, and got it. A man whose professional career was taken from him by his own body and whose high school job was taken from him by an accusation is going to be in that gym on the first day of practice this fall. The floor is what he wanted the whole time. Chapter 47. Greg Oden. The first pick, teaching. Greg Oden was the first overall pick in the 2007 draft, ahead of Kevin Durant, and he played 105 games in the National Basketball Association. 105. His body simply would not hold. He is 38, and there are two things worth knowing about him. The first is that he went back and finished his degree at Ohio State, and then worked in basketball, including a stint as an assistant coach at Butler University, which he left in the fall of 2024, telling a reporter that he wanted to be present for his young daughter and would return to coaching later. He runs camps and clinics, specifically for young big men, which makes a certain amount of sense given that nobody alive understands better what a 15-year-old 7-footer is walking into. The second is where he works. Greg Oden has been the director of player development at a firm that provides financial education and mental health services to athletes and entertainers, which is the same company Antoine Walker consults for. Think about what that firm's staff roster is telling you. The number one pick whose body failed and the all-star who lost $100 million, both employed to prepare young athletes for the things that happen to them. Oden has never been bitter in public about the Durant comparison, and he has been asked about it approximately 10,000 times. He usually shrugs and says he would have picked himself too. Chapter 48. Shaun Livingston, the Leg, and the Union. On the 26th of February 2007, Shaun Livingston came down from a layup at Staples Center and dislocated his left knee so severely that the immediate concern was not his career, but the leg itself. The video is still one of the hardest things in sports to watch, and we would gently suggest you do not go looking for it. He came back. That is the whole headline. He came back, and he played 15 seasons, and he won 3 championships with Golden State as one of the most reliable reserves in basketball. A man with a mid-range jumper from another decade and the calmest demeanor in any building. He is 40 and turns 41 next month. After retiring, he worked in the Warriors front office in player affairs and then left it and has worked for the National Basketball Players Association in player engagement, which means the man whose leg came apart in front of a national audience now spends his days looking after other players' welfare. He has also been reported to be part of an ownership group in a professional soccer club in Oakland. Of everything in this book, his is the story that most directly answers the question the book is asking. What happens to a man after the worst thing happens? In his case, the worst thing happened at 21, and he had 13 more years of basketball afterward, and now he takes care of everybody else. Chapter 49, Caron Butler, Tough Juice. Caron Butler was arrested 15 times before he was 15 years old. He was incarcerated as a teenager in Racine, Wisconsin. He has said and written that a stretch in solitary confinement was the thing that turned him around. He then played 14 seasons in the National Basketball Association, made 2 All-Star teams, and won a championship in Dallas in 2011. He is 46, and he is an assistant coach with the Miami Heat. Hired in 2020, and he signed a new multi-year deal 2 years ago that runs several more seasons. Miami is the most demanding professional environment in the sport, a franchise with a documented culture, and they wanted him. He has been clear that he wants to be a head coach. Asked directly whether he wants one, he has said 100% and that he feels ready. He did not get one in this year's hiring cycle. 5 jobs open. 5 other men got them. His memoir is called Tough Juice. He has spent years working on juvenile justice reform and speaking to kids in the system, which is not a photo opportunity for him. It is the actual autobiography. He is going to get a head coaching job. Everyone in the industry seems to think so. And when he does, the arc from a jail cell in Wisconsin to a head coaching podium will be one of the better American stories in professional sports. The ones we lost. We come to the part of the book that is hardest to write, and this year it is longer than we wanted it to be. The last 26 months have taken an extraordinary number of people from this sport. Some of them were legends. Some of them were the men who built the thing the legends played in. 2 of them were young enough that nobody had begun to think of them in the past tense. We are going to say each name and what is publicly known and nothing more. Where no cause of death was released, we are not going to speculate. And where one was, we are going to state it once and move on. Jerry West died on the 12th of June, 2024, at 86. His silhouette is the logo of the National Basketball Association, which the league has never officially confirmed and everyone has always known. He was a 14-time All-Star, the only player ever named Finals Most Valuable Player for a losing team, and then, in a second career that was arguably greater than the first, the executive who built the Showtime Lakers and later brought Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant to Los Angeles. He was open in his later years about lifelong depression in an era when almost nobody of his generation was. No cause was announced. He died at home with his wife beside him. Bill Walton died on the 27th of May, 2024, at 71 of colon cancer, 2 championships at Portland and Boston, and a body that betrayed him so relentlessly that he missed entire seasons. And then a second life as a broadcaster so joyfully, wildly strange, that people who never watched college basketball watched it because he was talking. He once described a game he was calling as the worst basketball he had ever seen, and then said it was also the greatest day of his life. He was the happiest man in sports. Dikembe Mutombo died on the 30th of September, 2024, at 58 of brain cancer. 8-time All-Star, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, the finger wag. He spoke 9 languages. He came to Georgetown on an academic scholarship, intending to become a doctor, and only played basketball because the coach saw him walking across campus. And he built a hospital in Kinshasa, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, named for his mother, who died because an ambulance could not reach her. He put more than $15 million of his own money into it. Of all the philanthropy in this book, his was the largest thing any player did. Junior Bridgman died on the 11th of March, 2025, at 71. He suffered a medical emergency, widely reported as a heart attack, while giving a live interview at a charity luncheon in Louisville. He averaged 13 points a game over 12 seasons and never made an all-star team. And he became a billionaire, owning hundreds of restaurant franchises and Coca-Cola bottling operations, and he bought Ebony and Jet magazines because he believed the archive mattered. Milwaukee retired his number 2. He is the single greatest business success in the history of the sport, and he was a role player. Slick Watts died on the 15th of March, 2025, at 73, after years of decline following a major stroke. The headband, the bald head, the smile. He was the most beloved Seattle Supersonic of the 1970s and spent his post playing life in that city as a teacher and a fixture. Dick Barnett died on the 27th of April, 2025, at 88. He won 2 championships with the New York Knicks in 1970 and 1973, and then went and earned a doctorate and spent decades campaigning for recognition of his Tennessee A and I college teams. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2024 at 87 years old, which was very nearly too late and thankfully was not. No cause was announced. Frank Layden died on the 9th of July, 2025 at 93. He coached the Utah Jazz through the arrival of Stockton and Malone and was Coach of the Year in 1984. And he was, by a distance, the funniest man ever to hold an NBA clipboard. Lenny Wilkins died on the 9th of November, 2025 at 88. He is in the Basketball Hall of Fame twice, as a player and as a coach, one of a tiny handful of people so honored. 9-time All-Star. He coached more games than anybody in the history of the league and won a championship with Seattle in 1979. No cause was released. His family said he was surrounded by loved ones. McKeel Ray Richardson died on the 11th of November, 2025, at 70 of prostate cancer. 4-time All-Star and the man who was banned from the league for life in 1986 under the drug policy. He spent the decades after rebuilding a life in Europe, playing and then coaching, got sober, and came back. His name is spelled Micheal, and almost every outlet in America has been getting it wrong for 40 years. Rodney Rogers died on the 21st of November, 2025, at 54, of natural causes related to his spinal cord injury. In November of 2008, a year after retiring, he was in a dirt bike accident that left him quadriplegic. He was the 6th Man of the Year in 2000. He spent 17 years after that accident, and his family and the Players Union asked people to remember the way he handled them. Eldon Campbell died on the 1st of December, 2025, at 57 in Pompano Beach, Florida. The medical examiner ruled it an accidental drowning. He was found on the beach beside a jet ski, wearing a life vest that was partly unzipped, having been out fishing. He played more than 8 seasons for the Lakers, bridging the Magic era and the Shaq and Kobe era, and won a championship in Detroit in 2004 against the team that drafted him. Doug Moe died on the 17th of February this year at 87 in San Antonio after a long illness. He coached 15 seasons, won 628 games, was Coach of the Year in 1988, and ran a Denver Nuggets offense so fast and so indifferent to defense that games ended 160-150, and everyone had a wonderful time. Oscar Schmidt died on the 17th of April this year at 68. He is in the Naismith Hall of Fame, and he never played a single game in the National Basketball Association. Brazil drafted him, and he turned the league down, twice because leaving would have meant giving up his national team eligibility. He scored more points than any professional basketball player in recorded history, and he did it everywhere except here. He was diagnosed with a brain tumor in 2011 and lived 15 years with it. Rick Adelman died on the 1st of June this year at 79. He won 1,042 games, 10th all-time, took Portland to 2 finals, and coached in Sacramento and Houston and Minnesota. His son coaches in Denver. No cause was announced. Stacey King was found dead at his home in Illinois on the 7th of June this year at 59. He had suffered a fall. In August, the official cause was released as hypertensive cardiovascular disease, and it was never established which came first. He won 3 championships with the Chicago Bulls and then spent nearly 20 years as the Bulls television analyst. And his call, too big, too strong, too fast, too good, is what a generation of Chicago kids heard every time something went right. Jason Collins died on the 12th of May this year at 47 of glioblastoma at his home in Los Angeles. He played 13 seasons, and in 2013, he became the first active player in any of the 4 major North American men's professional leagues to come out publicly as gay. He had disclosed a brain tumor late last year and confirmed it was stage 4 in December. His twin brother Jaron announced his death. Whatever anyone thinks about anything, a great many young athletes had an easier time because a 34-year-old journeyman center decided to go first. Brandon Clark died on the 11th of May this year at 29. He was an active player, a forward for the Memphis Grizzlies. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner determined he died from the effects of heroin and cocaine, ruled it an accident, and listed the combined effects of multiple prescription medications as a significant contributing condition. There was no evidence of foul play. He is the youngest name on this list by 18 years, and we do not have anything wise to say about it. Don Nelson died on Sunday, the 9th of August this year, 1 week ago, at 86, at his home on Maui. No cause was released. He won 5 championships as a player with the Boston Celtics, and then won more regular season games as a head coach than anybody in the history of the league at the time he retired. He invented the point forward. He was Coach of the Year 3 times. His family said that on Sunday morning, their beloved husband, dad, grandfather, and great-grandfather peacefully went to be with the Lord, surrounded by his loving family, and that through his last week, friends and family encircled him with love. That is the list, and it is too long, and every one of those men is somebody's father or brother, or the reason somebody in the cheap seats loved a sport. We will note one thing about it and then move on. In the space of 26 months, this game lost its logo, its most joyful voice, its greatest humanitarian, its most successful businessman, its winningest coach, and its first openly gay player. Nobody planned for a stretch like that. It simply arrived. Still in the game. Chapter 50, Doc Rivers, the man who chose to stop. Doc Rivers is 64, and last night he went into the Hall of Fame, presented by Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett. He got there 5 months after walking away. In early April, after a 32-50 season with Milwaukee, the franchise's first missed playoffs in a decade, Rivers stepped down, and he has been unusually insistent about the fact that it was his idea. It was 100% my decision, he said. His career numbers are extraordinary. 1,194 wins, 27 seasons, 6th on the all-time list, and a championship in Boston in 2008. What he does now, he does not entirely know. It feels strange, he said this spring. Usually after the season, you are already looking ahead. But it has been great so far. I am golfing. I am in Charlotte to see my grandkids. So I am doing exactly what I said I wanted to do. And then the honest part. In a year from now, he said, I may need something to do. I do not know. Television is something I want to get back into. Front office, maybe. He has said elsewhere that he would be surprised if he coached again, and that it is very possible he has coached his last game. 26 straight years of one profession, and a man in his 60s standing in a driveway in Charlotte trying to work out what a Tuesday is for. That is the entire subject of this book, said by somebody who is currently living it. Chapter 51. The assistants, McMillan and Cassell. 2 men on NBA benches right now who probably should have been given more. Nate McMillan is 62 and has been an assistant coach with the Los Angeles Lakers since 2024. Before that, he was a head coach for 19 seasons at Seattle and Portland and Indiana and Atlanta. 19 seasons. He is one of the more respected people in the profession, and in Seattle, he is beloved twice over. As a player, they called Mr. Sonic, and as the coach who followed. Sam Cassell is 56, and this is the strange one. Sam Cassell won 3 championships as a player, hit one of the great shots in finals history as a rookie, and has been an NBA assistant coach continuously since 2008. 18 years, he is currently with Boston. He has never been a head coach. This spring, 5 head coaching jobs came open. All 5 went to somebody else. Hopefully it happens for me, Cassell has said. I would like to have an opportunity to coach one of these teams. 18 years of standing 4 feet from the chair. Chapter 52. Mark Aguirre. The number goes up. On the 29th of January this year, the Dallas Mavericks retired Mark Aguirre's number 24. He is 66. He was the first overall pick in 1981, a 3-time All-Star in Dallas, and then he was traded to Detroit and won 2 championships alongside his childhood friend, Isiah Thomas. His number is only the 5th the franchise has ever retired. It took 45 years from the day they drafted him. Sometimes the honor arrives late, and the man is still there to see it, and that is the good version. Chapter 53. Horace Grant. The interviewer. Horace Grant won 4 championships, 3 in Chicago and 1 in Los Angeles, wore the goggles, and was the 3rd best player on the greatest team of the era, which is a resume that has aged extremely well. He is 61, and he has made a television show. It is called Legends in Session. It is an interview series. The first season is in post-production, and it debuts later this year, and the guest list is the whole 1990s. Phil Jackson, Bill Cartwright, Tony Kukoc, Charles Oakley, Robert Horry, his own twin brother Harvey, who also played in the league, and Stacey King in one of the last interviews he gave. It was a lot of work, Grant said this summer, but the first season was absolutely incredible. We reminisced about so many things growing up, he said. I learned a lot about my former teammates on the show, things that I had no idea they went through as kids, as adolescents, even throughout their careers, and as adults when they finished their careers. Read that again, because it is the thesis of this entire book stated by somebody who was in the locker room. He played beside these men for years and did not know what they had been carrying. Like my twin brother always told me, Grant said, Horace, you have been blessed by the basketball gods. Chapter 54. Robert Horry, Big Shot Bob, 7 championships. Houston, Los Angeles, San Antonio. More rings than Michael Jordan, which is a sentence Robert Horry enjoys enormously and deploys frequently. He is 55 and turns 56 in 9 days. He was never an all-star. He averaged 7 points a game for his career. And in the 4th quarter of playoff games, he was, statistically and unarguably, one of the most reliable shooters who has ever lived, which is why grown men in 3 cities still say his name with genuine affection. He works in broadcasting now, covering the Lakers, and hosts his own podcasts, and he sat for an episode of Horace Grant's new show. Every dynasty needs a man who wants the shot that nobody else wants. There is no statistic for it, and there is no contract clause for it. Robert Horry did it for 16 years across 3 franchises, and the whole league understood exactly what he was. Chapter 55. Eddie Johnson. 2 men, 1 name. We are going to do something unusual for a moment and stop to make a distinction, because there were 2 men in the National Basketball Association named Eddie Johnson, and their lives could not have gone more differently, and they get confused constantly. The Eddie Johnson, who is alive, was born in 1959, is 67 years old, played 17 seasons, won 6th Man of the Year in 1989, and has the 2nd most career points of any player never selected to an all-star team, which is an oddly perfect distinction. He has been a television analyst for the Phoenix Suns for more than 2 decades and co-hosts a satellite radio show. He is one of the best and most generous analysts in the sport. The other Eddie Johnson, born in 1955 and known as Fast Eddie, was a 2-time All-Star with Atlanta, was banned from the league for life in 1987 over cocaine, was convicted in 2008 of sexual battery against an 8-year-old girl, and died in a Florida prison in October of 2020 in the middle of a mandatory life sentence. We are telling you this for one reason. The living man has spent 30 years having the other man's record attached to his name by people who did not check. If you hear Eddie Johnson and think you remember something terrible, please make sure you have the right one. A word for the listener. We told you at the start that basketball is the sport where you can see the faces. Here is what we found, going through 60 of them. The men who landed softest were almost never the ones who made the most money. They were the ones who found the next room. Brandon Roy in a high school gym in the Central District. Muggsy Bogues in a church parking lot in West Charlotte with a trunk full of backpacks. Metta Sandiford-Artest, of all people, on the sideline of a women's college basketball team in Los Angeles. Vin Baker behind a Starbucks counter in Rhode Island. Learning the business on his way back. None of that is glamorous, and all of it is the answer. And the men who struggled most were not the failures. They were the ones for whom the next room never appeared, or appeared and then vanished, and who had been trained since they were 14 years old for exactly one thing, and then had it taken. We would ask one thing of you. The next time you see a picture of somebody you grew up watching, and he looks older than you expected, or heavier, or tired, or the caption is unkind, remember that you are looking at a man who was extraordinary at one thing in front of millions of people, and then had to become ordinary in private. Some of them managed it beautifully. Some of them are still working on it. Delonte West counted to 100 days this spring and said it out loud, and that was harder than any shot he ever took. Be kinder to them than the internet is. They gave you your winters. Thank you for taking this walk back with us. Go find a game on television tonight and listen for the shoes. We will see you on the next one. Books by Baron. Where Are They? Now a Note on Respect and Language. This book deals with illness, addiction, incarceration, bankruptcy, and death. We have tried throughout to state what is known, once plainly, and then move to what the person did next, because the second part is the part that is actually about them. Where a legal matter is unresolved, we have said so. Where a person has been charged and not convicted, we have said that too. Every time, without exception, because the presumption of innocence is not a formality. Where a person told their own story in a memoir or an interview or a podcast, we have used their framing and we have not gone past it. Nobody in this book was asked to relive anything for our benefit. Where we could not verify something, we said we could not verify it rather than filling the gap. And you heard us do that several times. That was deliberate. A tidy sentence is not worth an untrue one. A note on sources. Every present-day fact in this program was drawn from publicly available reporting and confirmed against multiple independent outlets before it was written. Quotations are reproduced from published interviews, press conferences, official statements, and the subject's own public remarks. Nothing has been invented, reconstructed, or attributed to anyone who did not say it. Ages, dates, and outcomes were verified as of the middle of August 2026. Legal proceedings, employment, and health situations change. Several of the situations described in this book, in particular ongoing court matters and coaching vacancies, may have moved by the time you hear this. About the Where Are They Now series. Where Are They Now is a Books by Baron series about the people who once lived on our screens, and the question time always leaves behind. Each episode takes a category of once famous people and follows them, person by person, past the moment we froze them in. The good landings, the hard roads, and the quiet second acts. This is the second entry in the professional athlete's strand, following football. More sports are coming. Disclosure. This program is an independent work of biography and commentary produced by Books by Baron and written by Baron Darby. It is built entirely from publicly available information. It is not authorized, endorsed by, or affiliated with any of the individuals, profiled, their families, their estates, their representatives, their teams, their leagues, their broadcasters, or their business partners. Any interpretation, characterization, or opinion expressed is the author's own commentary. All names, team names, league names, and trademarks remain the property of their respective owners and are used here for the purposes of commentary, criticism, biography, and historical discussion. Corrections are welcomed and will be addressed in future editions. Books by Baron,